Let me summarize the first passage before we look at the questions. I will read and summarize quickly. 3 years ago, Valley Fraser Selin adopted a blonde husky mix puppy whom she named Husk. Fraser Selin soon started looking for ways to curb the husk's totally wild behavior, she says, such as stealing food from the kitchen counter and barking incessantly at strangers. Based on the advice of a YouTube trainer, Fraser Selin started using an electronic collar or an e-collar that delivered a small shock when the husk misbehaved. But she says she felt yucky about it. So her dog was a little uncontrollable when she got this pup. So she tried to train it to control it, and she used an electronic collar which would give a small shock whenever the dog misbehaved. But the owner felt very uneasy about doing that. Fraser Celine rethought her approach after hearing about an animal trainer who taught a grizzly bear to cooperate with medical treatment using only positive reinforcement. So the earlier one was punishment: you misbehave, I'll hit you, I'll give you a slight shock. She was not comfortable with that. Then she heard about an animal trainer who trained a bear, a wild bear. Okay, a grizzly bear is a wild, ferocious bear, and she taught a grizzly bear to cooperate with medical treatment using only positive reinforcement. That means rewards. If that hulking animal, if that big animal could learn with treats and praise, she thought, why were dog trainers using prong and short shock collars? If a huge bear can be trained with positive reinforcement and rewards, why use punishment for smaller dogs? That was the catalyst into my advocacy, says Fraser Celine, who studied African wild dogs for her PhD and now works as a remote community liaison for Winnipeg Humane Society. What's her advocacy? She advocates. Advocates means supports independently for positive reinforcement training for dogs on Instagram. This is what she does. All right, she supports positive reinforcement for training dogs. Fraser Celine is not alone. So she is given an example of one person, but he says she is not alone. Many researchers, trainers, and veterinary and training professional organizations are advocating for greater oversight, greater supervision. Oversight here means supervision for dog training, which is unregulated in many countries. So we need greater supervision and control in countries where dog training doesn't have any regulations, including the US, though they sometimes disagree on the best path of action and choose to focus on the research that reinforces their preferred approach. So no countries, including the US, don't have too many regulations. So people who want greater regulation for dog training have some preferences. There are approaches, right? Do you train a dog with rewards or a positive reinforcement, or through small punishment, small or big? And these approaches people differ on, and so they support their form of training. Right now, it's the wild west. That means there are no regulations, no laws, no rules. Says a student at Arizona State University with a background in animal behavior and dog training. She recently published a study that analyzed the website of 100 highly rated dog trainers across the US. So she went to a website, she did a study of 100 highest rated dog trainers across the US, which found that most gave no indication whether the trainer had relevant education or certification. So when you are rating people, they're rating it on other criteria. The rating is not in terms of relevant education or certification of the trainers. Anyone can identify as a dog trainer. They can put up a social media page. They can offer services to the public. There's no expectations for their education, their continuing education, or their standards of practice. So anybody can become a dog trainer by putting up a social media page. They can offer services to the public, and they don't have to. People don't expect that they will show proof of their education, their continued education, or their standard of practice, says Bradley Pfeiffer, an executive director of the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers, an organization that promotes science-based training standards. So there's an organization which says dog training should have scientific basis. People with little or no education in animal behavior may be advising owners on handling aggression. When you don't have regulations, you can have unqualified people uh, giving training. Some experts and organizations are pushing for greater regulation in the industry. Under an umbrella organization known as the Alliance for Professionalism in Dog Training, two major certification bodies have jointly proposed model legislation that they hope could be adopted on a state by state basis. So, some organizations have been formed which are trying to push for some sort of legislation on a state by state basis in America. The legislation would require trainer licensure by a state board. So there's uniformity in certification, create accountability standards, and require trainers to engage in continued education with new breakthroughs, research in the field. Whatever is there, you can upgrade your knowledge through continued education. But the push for regulation in the dog training sector has exposed a schism in the industry over using punishments versus rewards. So the when there have been a push for rules, regulations, some sort of a uniformity, that has given rise to or exposed a schism, a divide in the dog training industry. And over what is the schism? Rewards versus punishments. Under the proposed legislation, certifying bodies would be required to uphold a policy that prioritizes positive reinforcement. All these people say you should stress on positive reinforcement, but does not entirely rule out punishment based approach, generally backed by research on the efficacy and welfare, and more popular among training professionals. They say, okay, rewards are fine, but it doesn't rule out punishment based approach, because they are saying that research shows that it's not that bad. Like it's based on efficacy, welfare, and it's very popular among training professionals. Although researchers and trainers largely agree on most points, they agree that punishment heavy approaches are harmful. They are at odds, they are divided about whether all out bans on aversive tools are productive. They say, okay, we should avoid punishment heavy approaches, but they are divided on the question. They're at odds, they have different opinions on the question of whether there should be a total ban on aversive tools, on punishment methods, because the approach may work in limited circumstances. Punishment based approach does work under certain circumstances. This is the passage. Which of the following best captures the essence of the schism in dog training industry? What is the main point of the schism or the rift in the dog training industry? There is a disagreement. The passage has said, it says, which one explains exactly what this divide is all about? What should be preferred between contraptions and positive reinforcement method of dog training? Will completely banning contraptions work in the process of training dogs? Which method of training produces faster results? What should be the minimum qualifications for a certified dog trainer? Now, let's eliminate the obviously irrelevant incorrect options. They have not talked about whether positive reinforcements or contraptions negative using tools, aversive tools. They are contraptions, okay? Tools, contraptions means tools. They have not talked about whether positive gets you faster results in training or negative, so C is irrelevant. What should be the minimum qualification? They said there is no regulation right now, but they have not set standards on minimum or maximum qualification. C and D are out. What should be preferred between contraptions and the positive reinforcement methods? Is it that they say, is it A or B? Is the disagreement about dog training should be given using positive reinforcements only, and the second body says no, you should use only negative aversive tools? Somewhere that's not the disagreement. Let's go back to the last paragraph. All right, what is the schism? over using punishment versus rewards, then B has to be correct. But no, no, no. He says something further. Under a policy, the proposed legislation certifies that you should prioritize positive reinforcement. You should give more importance, more focus to positive reinforcement. But it does not entirely rule out punishment based approach. Why? Because punishment based approach has shown to be quite effective and not that harmful, he has said. So, what are the researchers and trainers? What are they agreeing on? That punishment heavy approaches are harmful. You can't have a lot of punishment. You can't have a training which largely focuses on punishment. On that, they agree. What do they disagree on? Whether all out bans on aversive tools are productive, whether there should be an all out total ban on aversive tools, because they believe that even contraptions, even aversive tools are effective, right? So therefore, which answer is the correct one? B, will completely banning aversive tools work in the process of training dogs? Well, whether a complete ban will work or not. Therefore, my correct answer is B.